Welcome to Season 1, Episode 3 of covering high school basketball here in St. Louis. As you can see, it's just me today. No Jaden, no Malik, but we do have a special guest coming tomorrow on Tuesday morning, so make sure to look out for that. But even without the boys today, there's a lot to cover. Only one game we're going to kind of look at, but also there is quite a few games to look forward to this week, as it is a very snowy beginning of the week here in St. Louis. A couple standout performances, and I wanted to shout out a couple players that deserve some recognition for the production that they're putting up this season so far. Before we dive into everything, make sure to subscribe if you are listening or watching over there on YouTube. Make sure to follow on Spotify or Amazon Music if you were listening over there. And of course, give us a 5-star as well. And make sure to go follow on Instagram and TikTok at Arch City Sports for daily St. Louis sports content, whether it be St. Louis high school basketball, Cardinals baseball, SLU basketball, Blues hockey, St. Louis City soccer, and of course, we are actually probably going to transition into Battlehawks football and Mizzou football next year as well. So for all your St. Louis sports content, make sure to go follow over there. I mentioned there was only one game to kind of look at to recap, and that is what we kind of talked about last episode a little bit, and I made a clip on it for social media, and that was the Highland Shootout, which had several great performances. But we talked about the John Burroughs versus Father Tolton matchup, and it was close, just like we said. Malik and I said Burroughs slightly over Tolton because of the bigs, right? And Jaden said Father Tolton because of the guards, Aaron Rowe, Wilson, other guards they have there. John Burroughs defeats Father Tolton in this one by 2 points, and the bigs prevailed. Sheik Pearson with 15 points, but the star of the game was Tristan Reed, the standout big man over there for Burroughs. 29 points, 16 rebounds in this one led the way for John Burroughs. A 2-point victory at the Highland Shootout. There are several games that catch my eye this week when going through the potential schedule, and I'm probably going to miss a couple for people listening, just to kind of a forewarning there. But there are several games that caught my eye. Starting with on Wednesday night, there are two that I really am excited to keep an eye on. That's Lutheran South sitting at 6-3 on the year, and the very highly mentioned on this podcast, Westminster at 7-2 on the season. Lutheran South has a big Ben Long, multi-sport athlete, 19.3 points per game, had a 50-plus point per game earlier this year. He also has 6 rebounds on the season. They also have Travis Lunning, averaging 14.7 points per game. And you're going against a very talented Westminster team that we've talked about many times, and I've talked about their two stars many times. Will Powers, 17.3 points per game, 5.6 rebounds per game as well. And that's something to definitely keep an eye on in this one. I'll get to that in just a second. J.D. Robertson as well, 16.3 points per game. Don't give him enough love as he should be getting. So I mentioned the Will Powers 5.6 rebounds per game. I think this is very important because they have not a huge size advantage, Lutheran South, but you got Ben Long, who likes to score at the rim and predominantly scores at the rim with every shot that he shoots. So how are you going to counter that? How are you going to help team rebound in this one? Ben Long only gets about 6 rebounds per game. This is a big physical guy that can get you 8, 9, 10 rebounds any given night. So that's, I think, going to be a good test for Westminster, who have obviously dropped a poor game that they should have won a week and a half ago or so, and then lost in a very close one versus Webster Groves. So they're still sitting at 7-2, a chance for them to, kind of right the ship a little bit and get back on track. But a Lutheran South team that's scrappy, that's tough, and I would definitely not sleep on Luso in this one, especially with the advantage they might have finishing at the rim in this one. The second matchup on Wednesday night, 5-8 Cardinal Ritter, and don't let that record disguise you. This is a team that plays very tough competition, and they've already played 13 games on the year. Cardinal Ritter at 5-8 at Farmington, who are now 7-0 on the season. Not a whole lot of stats on this matchup that I could really find that are available out there, but it's two teams. Cardinal Ritter, that obviously plays really tough competition and is a very a powerhouse here in St. Louis, against a Farmington team that might be slept on a little bit, but they're 7-0 undefeated on the season, so definitely keep an eye on that matchup. Moving on to Thursday, we have 9-1 Ladue, and I've heard many comments about discuss Ladue, talk about Ladue, and we are definitely going to have a whole segment for Ladue today. They are sitting at 9-1, coming off a 2-point loss, their first loss of the year versus Edwardsville. They are going to be playing at Lafayette on Thursday evening. Lafayette, actually, I got my notes mixed up here. It is Lafayette, though. Lafayette, a team that's sitting at 5-6, played a couple tough matchups early in the year, but a team that could definitely give Ladue a kind of a challenge in this one. Lafayette kind of sitting in that middle of the pack right now at 5-6. A Ladue team, as I mentioned, have 3 guys over 10 points per game. Jack Edgerton leading the way with 20.6 points per game. We're going to really dive into his season in just a little bit here. You have Tristan Edwards, 12.1 points per game, and Will Becker at 10.2. I wanted to kind of cover Ladue, and this is the main matchup they have this week that I really want to keep an eye on. Is at Lafayette. It's not going to be an easy matchup. And Lafayette, I believe if I saw their schedule right, going off the top of my head here, they played Eureka tight earlier this year, might have even beaten them, if I remember correctly. So Lafayette, not going to be an easy matchup for Ladue, and I think that could be a pretty interesting game right there. Moving on to Friday, we have 10-1 De Smet, which also we have covered quite a bit here on the podcast, at Chaminade, another team that we covered at the very beginning of the season with their game versus Vianney. That's going to be on Friday night. A De Smet team with 4 guys, I've mentioned it before, that average over 9 points per game. Jordan Boyd, 14.4 points. Will Folk, 11.1. Riley Massey, 10.7. And Owen Duff, 9.1 points per game. A team that's very tough defensively. Ian Thomas, I always forget to add him in there. He deserves his recognition because he kind of leads the way when it comes to distributing the ball. And it's going to be interesting with how Chaminade defends more than anything, Ian Thomas. I think the guard play, as good as the guard play can be for Chaminade, I think it's right there for De Smet as well. I think that's a really good matchup guard-wise. I think that De Smet might run into the same issue Vianney had, which is how do you stop Jihadi White inside? Now, physicality-wise, I think Ian Thomas can hold his own, but when it comes to just pure size, I mean, it's going to be really tough to match up with a guy who's 6'7", like Jihadi White and J-Mo as well. So, going to be a tough challenge for De Smet. Chaminade sitting at 6-4, another team that plays really tough competition. De Smet, not saying they don't play tough competition, but it's going to be a good test for them at sitting at 10-1. And I think you're going to need, honestly, more than anything, I think you're going to need the physicality of Ian Thomas, a big, sturdy guy like him, to be physical with Jihadi White, and you're going to need obviously more than just him to hold Jihadi White down. But along with this, I'm kind of interested to see how Chaminade defends a guy like Ian Thomas, where we've seen a lot of people forcing him to shoot the ball and kind of testing him with that, and he hasn't been shooting it a whole lot. He's been kind of getting downhill and creating off that space. So going to be interested to see how Chaminade defends Ian in this one. But you have Riley Massey, a Division I commit. You have Owen Duff, who can fill it up. Will Folk, who's already getting Division I offers as a sophomore, and then Jordan Boyd, who's leading the way out of all those guys with almost 15 points per game. So very star-studded matchup in this one. De Smet versus Chaminade on Friday evening. 3 more on Friday. We have Montgomery County, which Jaden mentioned a couple episodes ago, sitting at 11-1 on the year versus and actually at Borgia on Friday evening. We have not talked about Borgia at all so far this year. Montgomery County, though, Clayton Parker, big man that's actually him and Andrew Moore, the two-headed monster over there, are going to be joining the podcast in the next week or so. So be on the lookout for that. But Clayton Parker, 22.8 points per game, 7.3 rebounds, a few assists as well, a few blocks. I mean, Andrew Moore, 19.4 points per game, 4.4 rebounds, 3.9 assists. Versus a Borgia team sitting at 7-4, and they have one guy that steals the show. That's Emery Warman, top 5 in the state in scoring with 23.9 points per game. And he has actually taken 92 more shot attempts than his next closest teammate. This is the guy that does everything for them. And so Montgomery County, if you can shut or slow him down and let the others beat you, that might be the way to go in this one. for Borgia, I just don't know how they're going to match up with a guy as physical as a Clayton Parker, and how you kind of, I mean, I could see maybe Andrew Moore and Emery Warman kind of canceling each other out. I think Clayton Parker could be the difference maker in this one, as he is a big force inside. Two more matchups on Friday. We have Lutheran South again, another mention for Luso at Principia, who is 10-0. Lutheran South, obviously Principia is favoring this one, but I just want to really see how they perform this week. I think this is two tests for Luso that kind of determine where they're at in their season. Sitting at 6-3, play a Westminster team sitting at 7-2 that is one of the most underrated teams in the city with one of the most underrated players in the city, and then you have Principia at undefeated, a team that's playing very, very well right now. One more matchup on Friday evening. That's St. Dominic sitting at 4-6, the young sophomore group over there at CBC 6-4. I think this is two young programs that could be very, very solid these next few years, and could be on the come up. So definitely interested to keep an eye on this one. St. Dominic led by several sophomores in that one, including Ace Armstrong, and then CBC. I obviously mentioned the video the other day about Braden Alford, but they have a couple of young guys as well to keep an eye on. So St. Dominic at CBC on Friday night. The last matchup of the week to keep an eye on, we got St. Mary's sitting at 7-6, a long break since they've played last, versus Alton from the Illinois side at 13-2. That's on Saturday. A star-studded matchup in this one. Reigning Gatorade Missouri Player of the Year, Zyree Collins, averaging 33.2 points per game, which is second in the state, 4.5 rebounds, almost 5 assists per game as well, and 2.5 steals for Zyree Collins. Really trying to make his name known for a second straight Missouri Player of the Year. Versus the Alton squad led by Semaj Stampley, 19.9 points per game, 4 rebounds, and just under 3 steals per game. These are two guards that are going to be going at it in a must-watch game on Saturday. Zyree Collins with his 33 points per game versus Semaj Stampley with his 20 points per game and 3 steals. So having those two guys defensively and offensively go at it is going to be must-watch this Saturday. So we had one standout performance from this past week that I have to give a shout out to. That's Abraham, and I hope I pronounce his name correctly. But the standout performance of Abraham Nayu, 42 points for Maplewood versus Althoff in this one. 13 for 21 from the field, 6 for 8 from 3. Abraham is not being talked about a whole lot here in the city of St. Louis. This guy's averaging 29.8 points per game for Maplewood, which is, I believe, now third in the state of Missouri behind Luke Walsh and Zyree Collins. So, Abraham, shout out to you, man. 42 points in this one, and averaging just under 30 points per game on the season. So, big shout out to Abraham for his performance and his performances so far this season. I just mentioned Zyree Collins. Zyree Collins, the reigning Gatorade Missouri Player of the Year, has gotten 40-plus points per game in 3 straight games. He had 42 versus Father Tolton. He had 41 versus Harbor, which is a team from Arkansas. Then he had 42 versus Jeff City. They've had a little bit of break since they've played last. Can he keep this streak alive this week versus Alton and a very tough defensive matchup with Semaj Stampley, who's averaging, just as I mentioned, just under 3 steals per game. I mentioned Zyree is averaging 33 points per game. Can he keep that 40-point streak alive this week on Saturday versus Alton and Stampley? Going to be a tough matchup. We'll see if he can keep that streak alive. Earlier in the episode, I mentioned Ladue. Earlier in the episode, I mentioned Ladue and Jack Edgerton from Ladue. And Jack is averaging 20.6 points per game, 5.8 rebounds per game, 2.5 assists per game, just under 2 steals per game, just under 57% shooting from the field. He's averaging 64.4% from the 2-point range, 44% from 3, and 87.5% from the free throw line on 28 for 32 shooting this year. Jack Edgerton deserves some love. This guy is extremely consistent and needs to be talked about more in the state of Missouri overall. He's a guy that I know a little bit personally, but this is a guy that is extremely consistent, and when you look at his numbers, especially points being put up, It's a guy that's not, I mean, I think his low this year was 11 or 12 points, but he's not a 35 points and then back down to 12. This is a 23, 26, 22, 20, just a steady, consistent guy for Ladue. And he's leading Ladue to a 9-1 record with wins over John Burroughs to start the year, MICDS, and they beat CBC by 20. So shout out Jack Edgerton and shout out that Ladue squad. I mentioned them in their game versus Lafayette this week, a game that I'm really going to be interested in looking at, and keep an eye on Jack Edgerton moving forward. The last game I want to discuss just really quickly here is a game that I'm going to be at, if weather permitting, here on Tuesday night. A young St. Dominic squad with no seniors versus Vianney on Tuesday at Vianney. I mentioned this because this is a very young St. Dominic group. I believe they have one junior and several sophomores. I mentioned Ace Armstrong and others that they have. St. Dominic squad, how are those young guys going to perform? They've already been tested early this year, sitting at 4-6, but how are they going to perform against Vianney in a hostile environment and also against one of the best players in the state, in Luke Walsh? So very interesting to see how St. Dominic performs in that one. I'm very excited to see Luke play again. I'm very excited to see Ace play in person. So very, very much looking forward to that matchup. But that's going to wrap it up for this Monday episode of covering high school basketball here in St. Louis. Of course, as I said at the very beginning, make sure to subscribe if you are watching on YouTube. Follow and rate the podcast if you were listening on Spotify or Amazon Music. And, of course, go follow us on all social media, but especially Instagram and TikTok for daily St. Louis sports content at Arch City Sports. I will see you guys tomorrow for the guest episode. I'm not going to drop a name yet, but be on the lookout on social media because I'll give a little teaser over there. So I will see you guys tomorrow for that guest episode.